Ladies and gentlemen, gather around for a unique look into the world of custom motorcycling. We've gathered some of the industry's top builders and fabricators on this stage to show you their skills live and in person. Watch as they chop, grind, and weld their creations into existence right before your very eyes. Feel free to ask questions at any time directly to your host, Pat Jansen. The doors to the shop are open, so pull up a stool, kick back, and welcome to the Grease and Gears Garage.
Do I need to keep this on or take it off?
You can keep it on, because now everybody knows you got it on anyway, Danny.
Ladies and gentlemen.
We were going to do it twice, just to make sure you got it. My name's Pat Jansen. I'm the host of Grease and Gears Garage. There's a cameraman up here. Yes, thank you. That's a smattering of applause. We expect that here in Washington every day. Listen, Grease and Gears Garage, people are like, what are you doing up there, and why would they let those guys up there? We're just a bunch of guys that build custom motorcycles. We travel around the country. We all have shops different places. Mark up here, it looks like Gimli out of Lord of the Rings. He's out of Flat Broke Chops and Rods out of Pittsburgh with Chris Callen. I've got Sin Central Garage out of Des Moines, Iowa. But we come around and we invite guys that are involved in the custom motorcycle industry that are world-class builders, and they show us one thing that they do every day in their shop that's just super cool. We hope to inspire you to be able to do something cool no matter what you're riding that makes it your own, makes your bike your own, whether it's a dirt bike, a Honda, a BMW, a Harley, whatever it is. We want you to make it your own. Educate you a little bit about tooling and how you do different things, demystify some of the stuff about motorcycles that people that don't work in shops every day or have never been in a shop don't really know about. But most of all, we want to entertain you a little bit and give you something to look at here. We thank the Progressive International Motorcycle Show for having us here. We appreciate Progressive Insurance for giving us a stage. JMP Cycles, always the world's largest distributor of aftermarket motorcycle parts, always a great partner with us, so we want to thank them as well. They're doing the JMP Cycles Ultimate Builder Custom Bike Show here this weekend. But right now, we have got something that we absolutely started in Long Beach with the very first Progressive International Motorcycle Show. Bike on stage from scratch. So we took and so we started massaging it. A wrecked bike, 2003 Harley Davidson Ultra Classic that had gotten towed. It out to Danny at Zippers, and that's who. Motorcycle is supposed to start stage, and now we've blown it apart, sent the frame off for powder or most of the body work that he's going to do to it. And so this weekend we're supposed to assemble it, put this Fitzmaurice from Zippers. Danny, yes, big round of applause. Mike's always good for that. Clap. Sir, if you could just clap. I know you got a lot of money in that wallet. That guy's not going to steal it. He's got plenty of his own. His hat matches his shoes. Any guy. $250,000 miles on that thing. When you pulled it apart, could you tell it had 250,000 miles on it?
Yep, for sure. It definitely had some wear on it, but you could tell that the owners of this motorcycle had serviced it. You know, that you could see some wear.
It's a lovely city. lovely city, very well planned. Your streets are laid out in a grid pattern, and then somebody took it like an Etch-a-Sketch and went like that. I don't know what happened. I had to go to lunch today, and I walked, and it said go to 7th and turn right on Mount Vernon. You can't turn right on Mount Vernon. You go generally that direction. There's another road that goes, you guys, man, I don't even know how you get there. But anyway, Chris is trying to park the van, so he's not with us right now. But anyway, Chris had this bike, the Black Pearl, and he built Cycle Source magazine with that bike. He rode it all over the country, selling copies of the magazine, doing events, going every place. And then one day he loaned the bike out. It got T-boned. Fortunately, his buddy that was riding it didn't get hurt. But the bike was totaled, bought it back from the insurance company. Danny took the motor. But he did service it. He put a lot of miles on it, but he took good care of it. But we wanted, that bike meant so much to Chris, 250,000 miles. And 20 years, over 20 years now with Cycle Source magazine, he's built it from nothing to the #2 motorcycle magazine in the world, and it was this motor that did that. So we wanted to give this new bike of Chris's that heart and soul. So Danny, walk us through the process. We sent you this motor. And what have you done to it, and what's the best way for you to describe what happened with this motor once you got it?
Well, this was a complete skin it down to bare parts. And I remember this engine because we actually tuned this engine back in 2006, 2007 for Chris. So everything was worn. It was gone. And this engine's built around our 107 high performance kit, which is a very bread and butter package of something that we make in our factory up in Elk Ridge, Maryland. So we wanted to do that, but we wanted to build this thing with a level of structural integrity to the lower end, new connecting rods, a new steel billet crank, getting all the line lapping and the bearings and everything upgraded so that he had a good, reliable engine that he could run.
Because obviously, Danny, this was a stock Harley-Davidson twin-cam motor. Chris, I mean, he hadn't done anything outrageous to it, had he?
He actually had a kit in it.
He did have a kit.
Yep, and he got good service out of it.
Stock bottom end.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was not the OE crank. It had a little bit of stuff in it. So when you're getting 10, 12 years of service out of a true high-performance engine that you ride a lot, that's a good, reliable engine. That's built with we call it, it's not really a crate engine, it's a craft-built engine.
But you could do better.
Well, we put the best we can do in it.
Absolutely.
And that's a variety of things that we employ in it so that you get amazing power, good durability, good fuel mileage, because we want something you can really sink your teeth into.
Beat on, and it's going to be around for a while.
You bet.
All right, well, walk us through this process, man.
Well, I don't know if we have the flying film there because I don't have the engine and part there, but it's got.
Do you want to run that?
You guys can, sure.
TJ, go ahead and let's see what happens on that big stream back there.
So, it's part of this process of this engine sat in this. There you go, and it's starting life there on the bench, and basically we take this thing through where we're basically employing the crankcase work. We updated to the redshift cams, which we make there in our factory, and the dual piston tensioners for the chain, and you've got a 107 configuration, so it's a 3.937 bore by 4 3/8 stroke, just like the Milwaukee 8 is, same bore and stroke configuration. We CNC port the heads. Those are optimized for the maximum amount of flow that we can put through there. And then, of course, with the induction and whatever is chosen on this particular engine for that to happen, it makes it all come together. Now, we've been in business now this is almost our 37th year. So we have a lot of practice at this, testing things. But even since the beginning of our company, I was just telling a good friend when we were walking in today, back then, the Harley motorcycle had a lot of reliability problems in 79, 80, 81. But people were willing to find little shops like we had back then near the University of Maryland in College Park, where they would search us out to say, I love my motorcycle, I don't like the way it runs, I don't like what it does, it's left me on the side of the road, but can you do something about it? And we just built on that.
And I know that's part of where you come out of. You were telling me earlier about working in a local Harley shop for free when you were a teenager in the early 70s, just so you could get. I got a great friend named Jerry Hall. and his nephew now works for him, who's an adult. I can't believe it. I think he's 30. He's got 2 kids or something. I can't believe it. We're getting old. But he's got Jerry Cyclecraft down in Moreland, Georgia.
I know Jerry well.
And he's been in business for 40 years.
He's been a customer of ours for probably since we were starting.
And what you were just saying is Jerry loves to tell the stories about the fact companies like yours, S&S, a lot of companies, you had to test this stuff someplace. And so he said, man, I would get stuff that would just show up and they said, well, try this. If it doesn't work, we'll send you something else. And so that was so you really also have personified kind of that cottage industry, grassroots kind of engineering and it's road proven. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can do in a laboratory, you know, and you can have machines give you a lot of information. But you've been able to develop stuff that real on the road world, you know, use is working.
We call it tribal knowledge, and we like to catalog it. We like to analyze it and then figure out how we can make it work for our customers so that they can enjoy the benefit out of it. Because we want to provide more reliability than an OE engine out of something that's high performance that you could get a lot of service out of.
Absolutely. So now this is a fuel injected motor. You did the heads on it and everything. What goes into that process when you're? I mean, how do you have now just a set package on an engine like this that you say we're going to do? I mean,
several configurations. Some are based on early torque. So if you're pulling a trailer, you're in a trike, you really don't like to shift above 3,500 RPMs. We have packages that way, and then we have packages with balanced power. It's very complex how a cylinder head is done because you have to develop a complex shape in a port, and then you have to test it. And if the test is good relative to velocity, relative to airflow, relative to the combustion chamber shape, we make power with it, then we scan and digitize it. Once we do that, then we create a program so that we can cut that same shape over and over in thousands of heads.
How has that process changed since you started? You know, I mean, obviously technology's helped you a lot. How did you figure all that out before?
Well, you ruin a lot of parts. And you do that on your own because you don't want to do it to your customers. So you develop things. But I mean, when we were doing iron sportsters and shovel heads back in the day, you know, you tested stuff. I remember we built nozzles for air, for water hoses to fit in the ports so we could see how the water would flow through the port. I mean, not much resources there, but you're trying to put things together so they do that. Yeah, some friends of mine call it racer engineering. You know? Racer engineering.
There you go. Now, how do you do that kind of stuff now? How do you?
Well, it's all done now. We have thermometers and flow benches and there's so much engineering into the stuff. It's kind of like watching a NASCAR race from 30 years ago to today. You know so much about things. You can predict how they'll turn out, even before you make the first part.
You know, I was at Petty Garage over in North Carolina with Richard Petty. Not his race team shop, but his garage where the museum is, where he hangs out.
Yep.
The fun stuff, his fun shop. And I was asking him, kind of those same questions about how does it work now. And he said, and I was very impressed. I think he's 80 years old now, or maybe he's 82 now. But anyway, I would have thought that he would just kind of let it go and let everybody else run it. But he took me in and was describing on a computer. He said, look, I can build an entire engine in this computer program.
Modeled in a computer.
He said, I can model it all and I can show you real world numbers. And he said he didn't believe it when they first told him he could do that, but then they showed him how to build it in the computer, and then they built it in the shop, and then they put it on the dyno, and he said it was dead nuts. It was right there.
Yeah.
And had it.
I saw Richard a couple weeks ago, and we were just catching up on a few things with him and Buddy Parrott. And anyway, to make a long story short, we were talking about the old days. And I remember reading about the guy who ran Chrysler Racing back in the early 70s, Ronnie Householder. And if it wasn't for the old days and the old school way of doing things, there wouldn't be no advanced way of doing it today. It's all kind of interconnected.
Yeah.
We do it so we can keep the prices of parts in a reasonable cost, because we have a lot of people that buy these parts individually or buy kits, and they do their own assemblies on their engines. And so we try to make sure that they can buy consistent parts, good parts, get it at a competitive price, so we use the technology to help do that.
Right. So you flowed the heads, and you kind of knew that process. You know, you do that process. What is the difference between the bottom end now and this motor and when this motor came to you?
Well, the crank is a steel billet. It's got a nice H-beam rod, and it's got a lot of, called structural integrity in it. Now it has a Timken bearing on the crankshaft support instead of the roller bearing, so it can handle more load. And it's pretty much dialed to make so it can last a lot of miles.
Now your crankshafts also, when they go together, they're much more stout. What is the difference in measurement on your pin?
Well, the twin cam got much bigger than the old one, as we talked about a couple of segments back. So the twin cam now has like an 1 11/16 pin, where you go back to the
Evos,
the pan heads, the shovel heads, the Evos, and even some of the I'm not an expert on the knuckles and the flatheads, but they were an 1 1/4 pin, so it was much smaller. So the rods, everything is much bigger, and they're all pressed together with a wheelbarrow load of press, so you kind of keep them there. And the other thing I wanted to talk about today is, when we get to it, is to make sure we talk about how to start a new engine for the first time, because it's like it's the worst time the engine's ever going to experience. It's like childbirth for the engine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's really traumatic, and
because people don't realize that. I mean, they say, well, it's going to go like that, and then oil will get all over everything anyway.
And it doesn't.
That's a theory. It's more of a myth than it is anything else. So, well, and we're going to get to that. How long, when somebody sends you a motor, I mean, how long does this, you made it look very quick there, that disassembly and reassembly process. What does that look like typically for an engine in your shop?
Well,
realizing you're really good at it.
Well, when the kits are done, we build them off of the original cores that the customer would send in. So that process probably takes about a week, 10 days to do in-house. And you get your parts back, so that you're not trading something in that looked really good, and you're not getting something that. So then when you take into the short block assembly, that might add another week or two, because depending on what type of crank, we're going to recondition the factory crank and the Harley rods, and just hone the journals out, put some oversized bearings in, or we're going to put an H-beam rod or something like that in there. And then we have some who just say, well, I want to get the short block done, I want to buy the kit, and I'd like to have it completely assembled. And because we're a craft-built engine builder, it's not like ordering a crate motor where you just get your phone out and start looking and bang. It's a different product. It provides a different level of output and reliability. Not that there's anything wrong with crate motors; they're all priced accordingly. You get what you pay for.
But pretty much those are all the same motor too. I mean, you can order different displacement sizes, but you're not going to be able. You're not going to call in to somebody that's selling crate motors and say, I'm going to be pulling a trailer, or I really don't like shifting over 35.
Right. You can't have this cam combination with this. Exactly. And that's what we do, is we try to match the thing, because our goal ultimately isn't necessarily if you have the fast CT or the highest mile an hour, or you're going to go to the racetrack or whatever. We just want to make sure whatever you're doing with this engine, it improves the riding experience to exactly what you want.
And that ties in perfectly. That's one of the things, all these guys that are involved with Grease and Gears Garage up here all over the country, we're custom guys. I mean, we like custom motorcycles. And by and large, not everybody on stage. I mean, everybody on stage right now, though, we're Harley guys. But, we have had a lot of guys up here that do Yamahas and BMWs. I just built a Royal Enfield for Royal Enfield this past year and got into that motor. But, part of the custom world is being able to do that. Being able to take your motorcycle and say, this is nice, but this is really what I want it to do. I want it to do X. It can be something as kind of, maybe some people might call it superficial, as making cosmetic changes because you really want it to stand out at a bike night. Or you can say, you know what, I really need to be able to have this bike be reliable. I'm going to ride it. This is the last bike I'm ever going to buy. So I'm going to rebuild this motor, and I want this motor now to be my 15-year, 20-year motor that's going to be in this bike. I want to be able to know that it's going to last that long. So You know, when you're looking at doing custom stuff, this is where motors in the custom world meet, is in some place like a craft motor shop like this. So.
That's perfectly said. I couldn't agree with you more, because the reality is life is short. You know, you get what you want, build what you want, do what you want, so that
absolutely
you end up with the outcome that you're expecting.
Because this motor is going to go in War Pony, and to give you a little bit of a background on War Pony, of course, I just told you Black Pearl, a 2003 Harley-Davidson Ultra Classic. Chris Callum of Cycle Source magazine got it. He built the magazine riding that motorcycle, shoving stuff in the saddlebags and on the back seat, and riding across country and getting advertisers and promoting and doing events and writing articles and taking pictures. Really all, you know, I mean, he had a lot of help, but man, that guy really shouldered that magazine up to where it is today. And so that bike meant a lot to him. He did a ride, which was it's an insane ride. It's called the Hokahay, and it's a race from Key West, Florida to Alaska. And you would ride to a destination. You had to go to a point. Usually it was about 1,000 miles in a day, and they gave you directions that you had to follow. And if you followed those directions right, you ended up at the destination you were supposed to get the directions for the next 1,000 miles that you had to ride. It wasn't a GPS thing. They didn't give you a city so that you could find the quickest route. You had to be watching those things. And some of the guys took a wax pen and wrote them on their tank. Other guys took magnets and just had paper, you know, on the directions there. But it was like, you got to go 24 north, and then you're going to turn left on 36, and then you're going to get to the interstate. And so Chris rode this bike in the Hokahay, and what the Hokahay Challenge was, that race was all about, was to raise money for the Lakota Nation, who was having a difficulty with their water supply. And they needed to be able to raise a tremendous amount of money so that they had reliable, clean water on their reservation. So that people got together and developed this. Whoever won the race was going to win $500,000, but you had to pay to be a part of the race, and it was this huge fundraiser. And Chris decided to decorate the Black Pearl. Of course, Crazy Horse was the chief of the Lakota Nation, and so he had a war pony that he had all of these Native American symbols that they would paint on the war pony when they went into battle. So Chris had painted up the Black Pearl to kind of resemble that war pony, and the bike became a celebrity on its own. Chris he did that ride from Key West to Alaska in 9 days, and he lost 11 days. That's right. He lost by 2 days. The guy that won got there in 9 days. You know, I'm proud of Chris for doing. I can't even imagine what that other guy did. He made a deal with the devil to do that. So anyway, the reason we went to Zippers and got Danny to do this is because that bike was important. This bike now is called War Pony, and it's going to have the heart and soul of the other War Pony in it. And so we're building this custom bike with that, and we're going to carry that over. And the paint job that's going to be on this bike ultimately is going to be like Crazy Horse's War Pony, and so it will have all those things. And the other exciting thing that this bike's going to do with this Zippers motor in it is it's going to go to Bonneville. And all so right. Yeah, and so Chris, Heather, this is Chris's wife down here, Heather encouraged him to ride this bike at Bonneville. Actually, that's a lie. The third show this season, Chris announced from stage that this bike was going to Bonneville. It just kind of fell out of his mouth. He looked at the bike and decided he wanted to ride it at where everybody's on the salt flats, where everybody sets the race records. And Heather's not real thrilled about that, because if he crashes, he's kind of like me. He's old and really thin. He's thin like me. Let's say that. Still, sir, if you laugh one more time, I'm going to come down there and beat the beard right off you. Actually, I can't, because you're half my age. I'm good for 30 seconds. If you can last in a fight with me longer than 30 seconds, you win. But he's going to ride it at Bonneville, and he's going to make memories on it. And then this is the bike that he's going to ride for the next several years. So it's exciting. Now, when he goes Sunday, God help us, Danny. Sunday, when this thing starts the first time, what do we need to do in order to prep a brand new motor to get it to start?
Well, the number one thing that I'd like to share with folks is a lot of times whether you bought a crate engine or you're building an engine, took this off just so we could take a peek here.
Yep.
There's the rocker top off of the...
You might be able to see this on the screens. We got lots of cameras.
So we're trying to expose that because we always recommend you start the engine with this off on both cylinders. And the reason being is that although it looks nice that, I think I still got one more bolt on that.
Oh.
It looks nice that they're on there, but the reality is it's not of any value because you don't know when the oil makes it to the top end. So I'd almost treat it, for any of you old enough to ever seen a steam train, you ever look at the guy that has to tend to the train when it comes into the station, he's got one of these and usually a grease gun. Well, we don't need a grease gun to do this, but we always like keeping something like this going because we want to heat cycle the engine where we only basically rotate it over and slowly build heat in because there's a lot of scrubbing action going on in the rings on the new cylinders. And, you know, we got new pistons, we got new pins, we got new bushings, we got new everything. And we really, truly don't know how the oil is circulated. So by running the engine over a brief amount of time, what you're doing is you're applying oil to all these high pressure points manually, and you're doing that until you see it flood the rear exhaust and flood the rear intake and flood the front intake and flood the... And because you want to make sure that it's pushing all the air out of the system. Yes, you can take the sending unit out, rotate the engine around. That's good for kind of burping the baby if you want to do that. It helps. But we see this is so important because you want to just give it a chance as it goes through that scrubbing process that's going on.
Now I know with, because I do hot rods too, I know that a lot of times in those motors when you're starting to build huge motor, usually drag race motors, they'll ceramic coat things inside and that kind of stuff. I was just talking, I wish I could remember his name, Carolina Ceramics down in North Carolina. I had him on my podcast a few months ago, and he was telling me about lining cylinders and stuff, ceramic lining. Do you guys, what's your opinion of that?
We actually use those coatings depending on whether it's a race-only application or a severe heat area. So if you live in the southwest of the United States and we're going to go through a process, we would just prefer to put those in. And they're typically thermal barriers. They go on the top of the piston to the combustion chamber. They go in the ports. They go in the valves. There's lubrication coatings which go. But see, the biggest problem we have right now is we got to feed oil to the tappets, the cams, the rockers.
Even with all of that modern coatings that you can do.
It's micro welding together. It's trying to weld the parts.
And it takes that long to get, I mean, once that turns over the first time, it's hot.
Right. And think about this. When we start increasing lift, when we start moving the valve faster, when we have a larger spring to control the valve train, then we're adding pressures. Pressures equal heat. So again, the micro welding process of how exponentially it multiplies is very quick.
I told my daughter, she's now an archaeologist, so obviously I wasn't very good instructor as a mechanic, a mechanical father, but I was trying to explain that to her when she was little, and and I don't know why I was trying to explain it to her. I don't think she cared, but she was in my shop, so I was explaining it. But I said, when you fall down on the carpet and you're running and you get a carpet burn? Just think about that. That's flesh and carpet, and it burns you like that. So you can just imagine two surfaces that are super close together that are metal, that friction. I mean, you can ruin a brand new motor like that.
We've seen 3 minutes of runtime, no oil. We're actually working on producing a video to show this. And if you can imagine that, what happens is when the destruction occurs and it maybe just seizes up a valve or something in there, it happens so fast that there's guys that they don't even know what happened. It just bam, just like that. So again, with a little bit of temperament of I'm only going to run it so long, I've got my can, I'm checking my oil, I'm starting my engine. We got a little bit of mess maybe once it starts flooding, no big deal. We can clean that up with a little brake clean and get you governed. But this way, when you seal this up, everything's oiling the way that it should.
So when you also, if you're ever out there and you're going to buy a car or a motorcycle or a tractor or whatever it is, and they say freshly rebuilt motor, This will also give you an opportunity to ask a few questions about, how that process went for them. Because, I've gotten engines in from guys that built them and said, hey, I've already, test run the engine and everything. It's good to go. Just drop it in and go. And sure enough, customer comes back, 600 miles later, and he's like, man, this thing's running terrible. I take it apart, and sure enough, that thing's within miles of getting ready to seize up, just because it obviously wasn't started correctly.
It's brutal.
Yeah. So you're going to oil that up a little bit. Now you're not going to be here Sunday, are you?
Maybe.
Oh, that would be awesome if you could be here. Sorry I bored you, sir. He's going to get more beer. I know what you're doing. I saw it in your face. Yes, sir. I'm just glad your brother and your daughter come to the shows with you still. That's sweet. Gosh. Now, we're going to start this thing Sunday, so it would really be good if you were here. Now, when you built this as a 107, now we're putting the fuel injection back on it. How is this motor now? How is the computer and everything? How is it going to know how to respond to this? What are we putting on it in addition to let it talk?
For sure. I mean, the engine management of sort is the directive of how it controls spark, how it controls fuel. So that's all calculated based on the engine size, the injector size, the what kind of pipe you guys are going to use on it, and various.
But when you tuned this the last time, what tuner did it have on it?
It had a Thundermax tuner.
Thundermax tuner on it.
Right.
But now it's not going to have a Thundermax tuner on it, is it?
It's going to have an updated
Thundermax tuner.
Yep.
Okay.
The most current.
Okay.
And that uses wideband sensors that feeds back every 100 milliseconds. So it's reading, reporting, and correcting. So the idea behind that is when you ride a motorcycle, you're riding a lot in changing ambient conditions. An example, let's go to Bonneville. We're at Bonneville. We're at 6,800 feet, I believe. And then on a hot summer day, if anybody flies airplanes, you have to do your corrected altitude, calculate what the air is. On a summer day there, it might be 10,000 feet corrected. So what that system does is it reads, reports, corrects the fuel pulse so that the AFR matches the target of where the tuner set it at that given throttle position and RPM. Okay. So the word auto-tune system is a very misused phrase in this business because there's a lot of systems that auto-tune
means you've got one tune.
Very little small part of that map. This thing is looking at every throttle position, virtually looking at various loads and such, and it's reading, reporting, and correcting.
So the difference it sounds like the difference between that is a lot of those management systems are not really management systems as much as they have a tune in them, and it's going to do that tune basically.
That's most of it, and narrowband sensors have small correction areas where they adjust.
This one's like having an engineer on board.
It's the same thing you would see in a Corvette or in a Porsche, something like that, where it's a very robust system. It's keeping the engine properly tuned, so we're not wasting fuel. We're not throwing emissions out the pipe we don't want. It's keeping that engine precisely dialed in so the AFR is correct. If you had a barometer there measuring the exhaust gas temperature, you'd see it would stay consistent around 1,200 degrees.
Okay.
So it's a very robust system. So it'll make the trip to Bonneville just right.
Just right. See, and at the very beginning of this, you're not going to like me as much as you did before. No, I am a carburetor guy. I love carburetors. People bring me their fuel-injected bikes, and I convert them to carbureted bikes. That's just kind of my thing, because I also don't like wiring. So I try to get down to 11 wires on a bike, so I'm always pulling wires off and trying to make them as simple as possible. But the other thing is because I've been frustrated in the past with all of the narrow parameters that I could get.
It is frustrating.
Out of those controllers.
Yep.
And with a carburetor, it was more infinitely adjustable to me than a lot of those other systems.
Agreed. And because I've been around in it for a while, I grew up with carburetors, and we developed carburetors, and we even developed alternative nozzles that we could put in those carburetors, and we did those other things because we could make a carburetor have a true stable air-fuel ratio. But times have changed. Now, you know, we got fuel pumps and gas tanks and harnesses and throttle bodies instead of carburetors. So this system really has followed that path that you're looking for,
right,
of the robustness. Now you have control to get everything running properly and not having waste, because it's really difficult to, when you know an engine tuning is almost like a vibration. It's a frequency. And when you know it's not right, you know it's not right.
You know it's not right. You can just feel it. And you guys know what we're talking about when you're on that bike, and you can just tell. Heather, you've got a question from Facebook?
Actually, Chris is losing his mind because he's not here. He wants to be here asking questions so bad, but he's on his way back. He wants to know what the difference with a true closed loop system is.
True closed loop system.
It's probably maybe that question about narrowband versus wideband. You know, open loop means open loop. There's no feedback. The OE.
Those are the frustrating ones.
Yeah.
It
right.
doesn't. It's not asking any questions of the motor. It's just telling the motor what to do, right?
Well, and you're getting the tune-up based on whatever the parameter was that was, maybe it was set in a dyno room, and you don't ride your motorcycle the way it may have came off the dyno.
Right. Okay. And a closed loop system is what you have.
Feedback through the sensors.
It's conversation.
Narrowband would be a limited amount. Wideband will be a more wider area.
So an open system is like what you have in a relationship when your wife is angry at you, gentlemen. A closed system is when you have dialogue and you share your feelings. And so you guys have no idea what a closed system is. I can tell right now. So, so that's a good question. Tell Chris to get here. We got a donut for him when he gets here. Oh, those are Mark's donuts. You know, we don't have any more donuts left. No more donuts. Now, what do you think this motor is going to, I mean, everybody's always horsepower, torque. What kind of numbers are we looking at in this motor, do you think?
This one should be about 125 at the rear wheel.
Should be enough.
And torque should be very similar to that. It's kind of a match, like a golden arch of a torque curve and a horsepower curve.
Okay.
So it should have what we call balanced power.
Okay.
Good to ride on low end, mid range, top end, really good.
Now if you were going to, is there a next step for you with this motor? If we were going to do something else with it, a different fuel injection system, or is there anything else that you would suggest with this?
We have what's called a Muscle Extreme. This is the Zippers Muscle 107, which is our bread and butter piece. But the Muscle Extreme is something we haven't posted on our website yet, but we're going to do that very shortly. And basically what it is it's got a much more exotic cylinder head, piston, and cam configuration. And it puts out about, I'd say 138, 139 horsepower. So that's
the reason I ask that is because I'm an Evo guy. If you got any of your Harley guys, I'm an Evo guy. I was a shovelhead guy that came out with the Evo, and I was like, never ride one of those. And then I got on one, and I was like, hey, wait. Nothing fell off. And then I was kind of sold on Evos. Never have been a twin cam guy. Never got into Twinkies. I don't know why. I do know why, but I won't say why. I just was like, I hadn't gotten everything I could out of an Evo yet. There was no need for me to go to a twin cam. I now own a twin cam motorcycle, and my wife has encouraged me to keep it and not mess with it. So, of course, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to mess with it. The reason I asked the question is because I'd heard an inkling that you were coming out with something that was kind of a step up from this. And now Chris has this. Heather, he's not going to get the upgrade, is he? No. But if I do now the Muscle, what is it called?
Muscle Extreme.
Muscle Extreme to my 2011 Road King, I'll have just a little more than my buddy Chris. And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? A little more.
The fine art of one-upsmanship.
I'm not keeping up with the Joneses. I'm kicking them out of the neighborhood.
That's right.
There you go. So now, so you will be able to do that Muscle Extreme. What about fuel injection systems? You know, what are you looking at when can the stock fuel injection system handle those kind of motors, or do you need to upgrade that kind of stuff?
Well, the pumps are satisfactory, and the wiring is satisfactory. When you get into the engines and you start changing cylinder heads and ports and compression ratio and stuff, it's probably a good idea to size what the throttle body requirement is. As an example, the Muscle Extreme has a much more exotic cylinder head, So it has anywhere from a 58 to a 62 millimeter throttle body on it.
Right.
Where this works really good with 58, I'd say, is maximum. So it's a different configuration. You'll have a different choke point on the intake manifold where it transitions into the port. And of course, the injectors have to be mathematically calculated to make sure that you don't run out of pulse, you know, when the thing comes up that way.
So I want to, on my bike, I want to upgrade those kinds. I want to, you know, get a different throttle body, get a different manifold, that kind of stuff.
Same thing you would do if you were going to run turbocharging, supercharging, nitrous. It all has to be mathematically sized.
I just nearly passed out when I thought about that Muscle Extreme with a turbocharger on it.
Yikes.
That's sexy though, isn't it? I don't need to go that fast, but I want to go that fast. I don't know what that is. You guys want to go that fast now too? No?
Pat, you should not go that fast.
Yeah.
So Chris says a lot of people are put off by the standardized shaft that are pressed on instead of the old tapered shafts. And then he follows up with, what does the twin cam take for head work? Is it like the old pocket ports that he did with the Evos?
So the question was...
Well, there's two questions. One is, a lot of people don't like the idea, they like the tapered shaft as opposed to the pressed shafts of the twin cam.
Yeah.
So that's the first question. Speak to the difference and kind of why the upgrade is actually, I think it's the idea that friction is at work as opposed to something else.
Well, a taper is a very strong way to hold something. The nuts literally were just something that held it in place. The taper did. Worked extremely well, and they built cranks like that from really since the inception all the way up till the twin cam was introduced in '99. It's not a good idea for a tapered crank in a twin cam because you have space that's being absorbed by the nuts. See, the taper comes into the shaft, into the flywheel, and then we've got a thread extruding, sticking out there. We've got to put a nut on. There's no clearance for that in this engine, so we have to stick with the press shaft that it is.
But the press shaft is a strong proposition. I mean, it's not necessarily,
if it's done right.
It's not necessarily weak.
There's a lot of problems with the press shafts in the OE engines back in 06, 07, 08. By 09, they started to change the way that they were manufacturing that thing. So, if you have an old motorcycle, and what we recommend when you do cams is to always put a dial indicator on there, and you'll see that on that video we did with the crank, so that you can see that. But it is what it is. I mean, the tapered shafts work really good, but they're really not. We can't migrate that platform to the twin cam engine.
But done properly, there really isn't anything wrong with the way that's done in a twin cam.
Right.
It's just has to be done properly, and that is again, I was never a fan of the twin cam for a variety of reasons. And that was early on, that was one of the things. If you got an engine that was getting up to 50, 60,000 miles, which a lot of my customers are riding, you began to see motors just become looser. But they've corrected a lot of that in the manufacturing process.
Yes.
I mean, but that was an issue. The second question Chris had was about porting the heads. Is it a pocket port? How do you, when you ported these heads, what's the difference between porting these heads and porting, I think he was referring to an Evo head.
Well, I think he means by the pocket ports that, if you were doing heads yourself, if you were doing this in your garage and you're just, how do I just improve it with just a little bit of work? You'd take a tool and you would work on the pockets of or the bowls of the port, and you work a little bit trying to smooth the short turn as it radiuses into the valve seat. But those are the areas that are the most important because the 90% of the flow is on the bottom of the port. But you can mess up a set of heads pretty quick because, man, you start cutting too much off the short turn, you say, wow, I can get more air in there, and you cut away the support that holds the valve seat in the head, so now the valve seat starts working loose in the cylinder.
And I laugh because back in the day, I had a really nice set of files that were my most advanced tool next to my 5-pound hammer.
There we go.
And I remember I could work my own heads. I was smart enough I could do that. Man, I messed up a lot of heads. And on motorcycles and cars. If you don't know how to do it, just don't do it. And if you don't have the tool, for sure don't do it. So that's
yes, sir.
Kind of the truth about that. So we're going to put this motor in there tomorrow, and Sunday. Well, we're going to put it in there tomorrow. We're supposed to start it Sunday. Man, I hope we get it started before we start it the first time on stage. But man, I hope you're around because I really don't want to mess this.
We'd like to see it. You bet.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be exciting. Now, before you leave, we only have a few more minutes, but I do want to ask. You've got Zippers Performance Products, been around 37 years,
yeah.
And Red Shaft Performance Camshafts, separate company, same company. Talk to me about the differences.
It's a great question. It's a very historical question. Redshift cams were founded by the late Dick Hilferty. Dick Hilferty purchased Sifton cams in 1970 from the legendary Hall of Fame Tom Sifton. Tom was the most prolific cam designer in motorcycle engines in the 1930s to the 1970s. I can't remember how old Tom was when he retired, but it was probably close to 80 years old. And he has a record of things that he did in the industry that was amazing. Dick equaled that same level of intensity and skill and design that he put into the things during his tenure at Sifton until 1976 when he sold, and then later Redshift cams. But he was the kind of guy that if he helped guys win at Bonneville, at the drag strip, he did it all. He did it all. He didn't want any credit for it. He was a hidden hero kind of a guy. And we met him back, I'd say, around 1983. And we tried some of his stuff, and we were so amazed at how good it worked. And we just hit it off, got to be friends, shared engine development ideas, and of course, we learned a lot from him because he was our mentor, he was our teacher. And so when we got involved in professional racing in 1985 to around 1996, Dick was a big part of that. And Dick was a big part of a lot of people's racing. And what we've done at Zippers, Dick has passed now, but we brought the company into Zippers, and we manufacture the things in our facility there, and we just continue that legacy to try to provide the best designed camshafts that we can for specific applications. Not OE parts, not crate parts. They're really specifically designed for the application of what you want to do with your engine.
Right on. Well, and I just think I wanted to ask that question because I knew the answer. And what I love about that is that it is a historic, it's a piece of motorcycle history. And rather than Zippers Performance Products just bringing it in and having it be an offering, you guys have allowed, Redshift Performance camshafts to stand on its own and to continue and to speak to that legacy of those two gentlemen that really, you say their names and people don't recognize them, but man, without them, for sure motorcycle racing wouldn't be where it's
at. They're bigger than life. And for Tom, he has a place in the Motorcycle Hall of Fame in Columbus, and some of his original equipment is in there and things from his stuff, and we need to develop something like that for Dick as well, because he's in our hearts and minds every day when we go to work.
Oh yeah, well, it's just amazing. Well, do we have any questions out here for Danny? Do we have anything left on Facebook? We got them? Okay. Well, Danny, you're going to be back up. Danny has also, share a little bit, because you were a teenager in the early 70s, and your neighbor bought a Harley dealer locally.
Yes, he did. 1970. Harley was a small company back then, and that was it for me. I was done with bicycles after I saw them motorcycles going up and down the street, and there was a racetrack not far down the road, and we could ride our bicycles down there, see that, and just to see stuff. It was a half mile, so we get to watch half-mile races, and then some of the local clubs would come in and they'd have drag races on the dirt, down the front stretch, and that was it. I mean, once that happened, motorcycling is just so much fun. Meeting the people that you talk to, they're just great. Being able to build something that matters for them is a real big part of our company, and how our staff likes to serve our clients and do things that way. And I couldn't think of another industry you'd want to be in.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have Dan. Yes. One question, yes?
Sorry, before you go, Carl Parser of Walking Tall Cycles wants to know what exhaust you recommend and what size.
Well, that varies by engine and cylinder head and cam and various things. I mean, as a general rule, the 2-in-1s scavenge real good. But I would tell you as an example, like we were studying the pipe on the M8, the new Milwaukee 8, and it's a great design. It's got a good head pipe. It's sized correctly.
Chris Callan loves to talk about volumetric efficiency.
Yep.
So
in that case, what we do at Zippers is we get the input from, say, a shop like that. Tell me what you're building. Let's get some specs on the cam. Let's get some specs on the cylinder heads. And then we come up with various pipes depending on the model of the motorcycle. So in some cases, we might be able to find a true dual or a 2-in-1 to 2 that works extremely well. Because the exhaust pipes we've found are a emotional connection of what people want, how they want their motorcycle to look. So we test a lot of things so we can verify what works good with the engines, because even though we might say a 2-in-1 might be the best package, they may not want that. So we got to come up with a dual design.
Right, and back to the custom world, if anybody's riding baggers out there, there's a balance between aesthetics and performance that, in the custom motorcycle world you want to hold. Some people don't, they just throw it out the window and they either go all aesthetics or all performance, and typically you end up with a bike that rides great but looks like crap, or you have a bike that looks awesome, it doesn't run very good. But for a lot of guys to keep that balance, they're going to run the true duals. They're going to lose a little bit in their performance maybe, but it doesn't mean that they've given it all up. I mean,
biggest mistake we see is they purchase pipes with too large or no baffle, large perforated baffles. They make too much noise and they don't make any power. The reality is, if you get the baffling right, you get more power, less decibels, everything works in the right direction. So
if your bike is really loud, bottom line, your bike or your car is really loud, it is not performing at its peak. I can tell you that right now. That's just bottom line. So, because I remember back in the day, straight pipes, well, they still are, staggered, straight pipes were all the rage, and especially on the Ironhead Sportsters I used to run. Yes. They would, the no back pressure, and it just sucked all the power out of them, and you get a headwind and you couldn't go over 45 going uphill, and it was well, Danny, we're going to have him on stage tomorrow at 3 o'clock with some other folks in a panel discussion. But we're going to talk to him a little bit tomorrow because he not only, theorizes about it like marketing people do and have these round tables and talk about things that they don't know about. Danny actually worked in a Harley dealership. He watched his neighbor's Harley dealership through the AMF years coming up, and has been intimately involved in the industry, watching it, and has seen segments of the industry kind of die and then be resurrected, and has a real good sense of how that works. And anybody that's in the motorcycle industry right now, whether you're a consumer or whether you're in there trying to make your buck out of it, we are in one of those places in the motorcycle industry now, where we see kind of things they call them paradigm shifts. We're in a paradigm shift right now in motorcycling that is not unlike what we saw happen in the 70s and early 80s, and there's going to be a little bit some shifting, and so it'll be fascinating to kind of hear Danny tell us about that and how we can look at those old lessons, which we're not very good at doing, and perhaps learn something from them so we can apply them to today. But ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with Grease and Gears Garage on Facebook Live and right here at the Progressive International Motorcycle Show in Washington. And Danny, thank you so much. It's good to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, Danny Fitzmaurice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you so